Part two of the Indiscreet Letter. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Indiscreet Letter by Eleanor Hallowell Abbott. Part two. With sudden tardy contrition the salesman's amused eyes wandered to the open book on the youngish girl's lap. "I sure talk too much," he muttered. "I guess maybe you'd like half a chance to read your story." The expression on the youngish girl's face was a curious mixture of humor and seriousness. "There's no special object in reading," she said, "when you can hear a bright man talk." As unappreciatingly as a duck might shake champagne from its back, the Traveling Salesman shrugged the compliment from his shoulders. "Oh, I'm bright enough," he grumbled, "but I ain't refined." Slowly to the tips of his ears mounted a dark red flush of real mortification. "Now there's some traveling men," he mourned, "who are as slick and fine as any college president you ever saw. But me, I'd look coarse sipping warm milk out of a gold-lined spoon. I haven't had any education. And I'm fat, besides." Almost plaintively he turned and stared for a second from the young electrician's embarrassed grin to the youngish girl's more subtle smile. "Why, I'm nearly 50 years old," he said, "and since I was 15 the only learning I ever got was what I picked up in trains talking to whoever sits nearest to me. Sometimes it's hens I learn about. Sometimes it's national politics. Once a young Canuck farmer sitting up all night with me coming down from St. John learned me all about the French Revolution. And now and then high school kids will give me a point or two in astronomy. And in this very seat I'm sitting in now, I guess, a red kerchiefed Dago woman who worked on a pansy farm just outside of Boston used to ride in town with me every night for a month, and she coached me quite a bit on Dago talk, and I paid her $5 for that." "Oh, dear me," said the Youngish Girl with unmistakable sincerity. "I'm afraid you haven't learned anything at all from me." "Oh, yes, I have too!" cried the Traveling Salesman, his whole round face lighting up suddenly with real pleasure. "I've learned about an entirely new kind of lady to go home and tell my wife about. And I'll bet you $100 that you're a good deal more of a lady than you'd even be willing to tell us. There ain't any provincial. Don't you dare speak to me. This is the first time I ever was on a train air about you. I'll bet you've traveled a lot. All around the world. Froze your eyes on icebergs and scorched 'em some on tropics." "Yes," laughed the Youngish Girl. "And I'll bet you've met the Governor General at least once in your life." "Yes," said the girl, still laughing. "He dined at my house with me a week ago yesterday." "And I'll bet you most of anything," said the Traveling Salesman shrewdly, "that you're haughtier than haughty with folks of your own kind. But with people like us, me and the electrician, or the soldier's widow from South Africa who does your washing, or the Eskimo man at the circus, you're as simple as a kitten. All your own kind of folks are nothing but grown-up people to you, and you treat 'em like grown-ups, all right. 100 cents to the dollar. But all our kind of folks are playmates to you, and you take us as easy and pleasant as you'd slide down on the floor and play with any other kind of a kid. Oh, you can tackle the other proposition all right, dances and balls and general old lace glories, but it ain't fine loafers sitting around in parlors talking about the weather that's going to hold you very long, when all the time your heart's up and over the back fence with the kids who are playing the games. And oh, say," he broke off abruptly, "would you think it awfully impertinent of me if I asked you how you do your hair like that? 'Cause surer than smoke, after I get home and supper is over and the dishes are washed and I've just got to sleep, that little wife of mine will wake me up and say, 'Oh, just one thing more. How did that lady in the train do her hair?'" With her chin lifting suddenly in a burst of softly uproarious delight, the Youngish Girl turned her head halfway round and raised her narrow black gloved hands to push a tortoise shell pin into place. "Why, it's perfectly simple," she explained. "It's just 3 puffs and 2 curls and then a twist." "And then a twist?" quizzed the Traveling Salesman earnestly, jotting down the memorandum very carefully on the shining black surface of his sample case. "Oh, I hope I ain't been too familiar," he added with sudden contriteness. "Maybe I ought to have introduced myself first. My name's Clifford. I'm a drummer for Sales and Sales. Maine and the Maritime Provinces, that's my route. Boston's the home office. Ever been in Halifax?" he quizzed a trifle proudly. "Do an awful big business in Halifax. Happen to know the Emporium store? The London, Liverpool and Halifax Emporium?" The Youngish Girl bit her lip for a second before she answered. Then very quietly, "Yes," she said, "I know the Emporium slightly. That is, I own the block that the Emporium is in." "Gee!" said the Traveling Salesman. "Oh, gee! Now I know I talk too much." In nervously apologetic acquiescence the Young Electrician reached up a lean, clever, mechanical hand and smooched one more streak of black across his forehead in a desperate effort to reduce his tousled yellow hair to the particular smoothness that befitted the presence of a lady who owned a business block in any city whatsoever. "My father owned a store in Malden once," he stammered out just a trifle wistfully. "But it burnt down, and there wasn't any insurance. We always were a powerfully unlucky family. Nothing much ever came our way." Even as he spoke, a toddling youngster from an overcrowded seat at the front end of the car came adventuring along the aisle after the swaying, clutching manner of tired, fretty children on trains. Hesitating a moment, she stared up utterly unsmilingly into the Salesman's beaming face, ignored the Youngish Girl's inviting hand, and with a sudden little chuckling sigh of contentment climbed up clumsily into the empty place beside the Young Electrician, rummaged bustlingly around with its hands and feet for an instant in a petulant effort to make a comfortable nest for itself, and then snuggled down at last, lolling halfway across the Young Electrician's perfectly strange knees, and drowsed off to sleep with all the delicious, friendly, unconcerned sang-froid of a tired puppy. Almost unconsciously the Young Electrician reached out and unfastened the choky collar of the heavy, sweltering little overcoat, yet not a glance from his face had either lured or caressed the strange child for a single second. Just for a moment, then, his smiling eyes reassured the jaded, jabbering French Canadian mother who turned round with craning neck from the front of the car. "She's all right here. Let her alone," he signaled gesticulatingly from child to mother. Then, turning to the Traveling Salesman, he mused reminiscently. "Talking's all right, but where in creation do you get the time to think? Got any kids?" he asked abruptly. "No," said the Traveling Salesman. "My wife, I guess, is kid enough for me." Around the Young Electrician's eyes the whimsical smile wrinkles deepened with amazing vividness. "Huh!" he said. "I've got 6." "Gee!" chuckled the Salesman. "Boys?" The Young Electrician's eyebrows lifted in astonishment. "Sure they're boys," he said. "Why, of course!" The Traveling Salesman looked out far away through the window and whistled a long, breathy whistle. "How in the deuce are you ever going to take care of 'em?" he asked. Then his face sobered suddenly. "There was only 2 of us fellows at home, just Daniel and me, and even so, there weren't ever quite enough of anything to go all the way around." For just an instant the Youngish Girl gazed a bit skeptically at the Traveling Salesman's general rotund air of prosperity. "You don't look exactly like a man who's never had enough," she said smilingly. "Food?" said the Traveling Salesman. "Oh, shucks! It wasn't food I was thinking of. It was education. Of course," he added conscientiously, "of course when the crops weren't either too heavy or too blooming light, Pa usually managed some way or other to get Daniel and me to school, and schooling was just nuts to me, and not a single nut so hard or so green that I wouldn't have chawed and bitten my way clear into. But Daniel somehow couldn't seem to see just how to enter a mushy Bartlett pear without a knife or a fork in some other person's fingers. He was all right, you know, but he just couldn't seem to find his own way alone into anything. So when the time came—" The grin on the Traveling Salesman's mouth grew just a little bit wry at one corner. And so when the time came it was an awful nice, sweet smelling June night, I remember and I'd come home early. I walked